What's up guys, welcome to this review of The Mandalorian Season 2. Better late than never. So, Season 2 kicks off where Season 1 ended, where the Mandalorian, Din Djarin I believe he's called. They rarely say his name so it's hard to keep track of it. And the child, we'll get to what his name is later on. They're on their journey to try and find where the child belongs. Whether that be his species or the Jedi. So that's where we start things off. In a nutshell, what did I think of The Mandalorian Season 2? I thought it was great. I think it was a big improvement over Season 1. Season 1 I thought was okay. It had some good elements, but there were a few too many standalone episodes in the middle that didn't necessarily have to be there. It felt like they were dragging it out. This season hits the ground running. Every episode feels like a little Star Wars adventure. And it's great because of that. Every episode is exciting, every episode has new elements of lore and canon introduced. It feels like they're constantly expanding the Star Wars universe this season, while also fleshing out parts that we've already seen before. Honestly, it's one of the best pieces of Star Wars we've seen in quite a while. And yet it does get into a little too fan servicey at times, because you could argue that, oh, here's something we know from this film, here's something we know from this film, here's something we know from this TV show, here's something from a book, here's something from a video game. The elements in which they're pulling from all the lore are really interesting and cool. The fact that they are pulling so many things from video games I think is really cool. There's a lot of stuff from Knights of the Old Republic, some stuff from the Dark Forces games and Shadows of the Empire. All of that stuff's cool and interesting. As a Star Wars fan, it gets me giddy and excited whenever it's there. But it's also a case of, do we really need it, and do we really need that much of it? So one big example is in the very first episode of this season, they go to Tatooine, a planet we've seen many times before, and we go to this new location on Tatooine, a new town, and in this location there's a character who's related to another character we know. There's also a link to the Phantom Menace with a pod racer. There's a link to the video game Knights of the Old Republic. There's a bunch of these links and connections all connected to this one little town. So while it does feel like they're fleshing out the universe and expanding on things, it also feels like they're also narrowing in. Why does this one person, this one town, have so many connections to so many different things? It feels like they could have been spread out a little bit. But one of the main things that makes this season better in comparison to Season 1 is that there's an overarching narrative now. The characters have a clear-cut goal and focus, and every episode feels like he's actually trying to do something to reach his goal. Yeah, sometimes he does hit a pit stop, like in episode 2 where he crash lands on a planet, but at the end of the day he's still going on this journey. We still know what his goal is, we're still with him for this ride, and it's a fun, exhilarating ride as it lasts. Whereas in Season 1, what his goal was a little nebulous. Halfway through Season 1, it looked like he was contemplating whether or not he actually wants to do this mission or not. And that kind of slowed things down. This season, no, he's focused, he's determined, we know what he's doing. It's very easy for us to root for him and to get invested into the story. And while there are one or two episodes that do slow things down and do a very slight detour this season, I do think the story is more focused, it is more cohesive throughout the season. There's much more of an overarching narrative this season compared to Season 1. In Season 1, it was basically the first 2 episodes and then the last 2 episodes were the overarching story, then everything in the middle was a bit standalone. This season, it's much more, almost every episode continues the story, with 1 or 2 exceptions being slight detours. But by the end of the season, talking about the fan service stuff, this season is very clearly now a continuation or a sequel or spin-off of Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, without going into too many specifics or spoilers here. And that's cool as a fan of Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, but again it's like, did we really need this to be connected to those? Couldn't this have been its own thing on the side? Really like expanding the Star Wars universe, saying, hey, there's more than just this central storyline about the Empire versus the Resistance or Rebels, whatever you want to call them. But no, now this is all connected to that, and it looks like maybe Season 3 is going to go one of 2 ways. Maybe it's going to continue with that, or maybe it's going to go off and do its own thing with a different location. We'll have to wait and see. But I will say that a lot of the fan service stuff feels deserved, particularly towards the end of the season, where they are establishing certain things, establishing certain connections and hinting at certain things, that when we actually see those things, it's still surprising, but it's also like, yeah, of course that's what's going to happen. So it does feel deserved a lot of the times, but again, there are a few exceptions, like first episode with Anakin's pod race. Did that really need to be there? Did it really need to be connected to this one location that Mandalorian happens to go to? Not necessarily. It's cool, but we didn't need it. But very exciting, very exhilarating, lots of cool action scenes. The action this season is really, really good, very exciting, very exhilarating, like I said. But there's also a lot of emotion, a lot of drama. Dave Filoni's episode comes along about, I think it's episode 6, something like that. And it actually slows things down. It's still got the action set pieces in there, but it feels much more like a Star Wars movie of like the Empire Strikes Back, where they do slow things down, or even The Last Jedi, where they're actually going into these deeper themes and actually getting a bit more emotional and exploring what it feels to be in the Force and the connections between characters. It's really cool that they do find the balance there. It's not just non-stop action. And I think this season also does a good job of establishing certain mysteries and hinting at certain things to come. So about halfway through this season, there's something that may hint at or connect to the rise of Skywalker. Not going into spoilers or anything like that, but you probably know what I'm talking about. And I think it's pretty clear that that's what they're doing. They're trying to fill in the gaps, lead up to the rise of Skywalker, and explain how certain things happen and what's going on in the background. And it's pretty good that way on. Will we actually see more of that? I don't know, because it looks like Mando's story is going to go in a different direction now. So we'll just have to wait and see. But there's definitely room for that to be expanded upon, and with the announcement of all these spin-off TV shows that are going to be interconnected and lead up to this big event series, it's very possible that we're going to be expanding on some of those mysteries. But to talk about the characters, the main characters of Din Djarin, Mando, and the child are really compelling. And I think it's saying something when one person, you never really see his face, and the other is a puppet. The fact that we get so much emotion, so much character from these two individuals, that their connection and bond works so well, despite the fact that there are clear limitations to how they can convey their emotions and how they can convey what they're feeling and thinking and so on and so forth, is impressive. It goes towards the acting, it goes towards the direction. And I think each and every character in the show has clear-cut motivations and goals and has their own story going on. So we see Mando go to these different locations, and each time we see a new character pop up or even an old character pop up, it looks like they're just going about their life, they've got something else going on, they feel well developed, they feel real. And Mando's just happening to pop in while they're in the middle of their story or whatever. So that really does feel cool, and it does make this universe feel lived in and real. And speaking of which, some of the more familiar Star Wars characters, let's say, that pop up this season also feel deserved. It feels like, yeah, it makes sense that these characters are here. And of course it's really cool and exciting to see certain characters like this show up. They're never distracting, they never take away the attention from Mando. Maybe a couple of times where they do, but that's very deliberately so. But it still feels like Mando is the main character. But across the board, I think the cast is great. There's some good acting in there. They've got some big names showing up here and there, both in terms of characters and in terms of the actors playing them. It makes perfect sense, some of these casting choices. And everyone does their bit, I would say. One little character thing which I do want to get into is the villain. So we were introduced to the villain at the end of season 1. It's Moff Gideon, played by Giancarlo Esposito. A great actor, puts in a really good performance here. The problem though is that I think his performance is a little underdeveloped and a little inconsistent. I think we are going to see more of his character going forward, and I do think we're going to flesh out his character more. So they're probably going to address that and they're going to fix it. Hopefully, fingers crossed. But the problem is, half the time he's presented as menacing, and then the other half he's like presented as a bit goofy, and so one minute he's trying to be scary and intimidating, the next he's trying to be like a bit of a jokester, and it's like a little geely and stuff, and it's weird. It's like, right, these feels like two different people. And then towards the end of the season, we actually see him almost like giving off these quips and one-liners and remarks and so on. And obviously he's trying to get into the characters' heads and sway their views and so on. But it just feels like these elements aren't cohesive. They're not necessarily the same person. So The fact that we only see these snippets of him here and there doesn't help either, because we don't get a great idea of who exactly is Moff Gideon. And again, I think they are going to address this moving forward. I think we are going to see more of this character. So hopefully they'll fix that. Of course, this could just be a layered character. Maybe these are all part of the same person, but like I said, we don't see enough of him to actually get a sense of that. So it does feel like, oh, here's him on a good day. Oh, here's him on a bad day. It's hard to tell because of how little we do see of him. In terms of production, I've already touched on some of this stuff. I think it's well paced, much better paced than season 1. It constantly feels like they're building up to things, even when there are a couple of episodes that take a little bit of a detour. I think that's well directed on the whole. There's some great visuals this season. The music and the score is brilliant. It feels like it's doing something different with Star Wars themes and songs and styles, but also it still feels like, yeah, this is Star Wars, so that's cool. Everything seems to build up on what came before it. It feels like everything's relevant, everything's important. Even like minor characters and locations and things that we saw in season 1 pop up again this season, so it isn't just, hey, here's something from a Star Wars movie or here's something from a different TV show. It is things that we've already seen in this show that they're constantly building up on, and that's cool. The most noticeable thing I would say about this season is the budget has been, I don't think the budget's been increased necessarily, but it was well known that in season 1 a lot of the budget went to building the technology and the environment in which they filmed the season. So they built this huge like circular LED screen and with a ceiling and everything. So a lot of money went into that they could then just put people on a stage and project whatever image they wanted behind them, and it worked really well. But the cost of that was that some of the environments did seem a little flat, some of the environments didn't seem all that lived in. They couldn't afford to bring in all the extras and the props and the sets and so on. This season though, because the tech's already in place, they don't need to spend that amount of money on the tech again. They can just fill up the stuff with what's going on. So every location we see Mando go in this time feels like it's a real place. It feels like there's bustling up people of life and things going on. So there's market stalls, there's people going around in the streets, there's harbors and all sorts of stuff going on. It feels like Mando's not just the only person in this world anymore. It doesn't feel like half the galaxy's deserted. So that's really good. And also, it's worth saying that I think the visual effects are improved this season as well. Perhaps because of that. They can now put more time into the visual effects. Everything looks film-like. It looks like a Star Wars movie, with one exception, which I'm going to get into in the spoiler section. But there's one exception where the visual effects are like, ooh, that does not look good. But everything else I was pretty much wowed by. I think the Krayt Dragon in the first episode is really impressive. And looking at the behind the scenes stuff, how they've done that, yeah, they're treating each episode like it is a movie, and it's probably got like a movie budget. So yeah, with one exception, like I said. Visual effects great, action great, production as a whole brilliant, really well made show. So that's what I thought of Star Wars The Mandalorian Season 2, but I am going to go into spoilers now. If you haven't seen Season 2 yet, well, why are you watching this in the first place? Go watch Season 2. I've had to record this later than I wanted, so you've had time to watch it. But I'm going into spoilers now. If you're leaving though, subscribe to my channel before you go to get more content like this, why not? And of course remember, I stream on Twitch every Tuesday and or Wednesday, so you can catch my thoughts up to date as I get them on a bunch of things there. You can also go over to Twitter and Instagram, follow me at _Grant Burton. But enough of that. What you really want to know are the spoilers for The Mandalorian Season 2. So I'm going to go character by character here. You've been warned. Ahsoka Tano. So yes, Ahsoka Tano. Probably the worst kept secret about this season is that Ahsoka was going to be in it. We knew that. We knew she was going to be in it. We knew she was going to be played by Rosario Dawson. We knew Dave Filoni was going to direct that episode. And Rosario Dawson showing in, she was great. She looks like an older Ahsoka. She looks closer to the Ahsoka in Star Wars Rebels than she does as the teenage Ahsoka, which of course makes a bit more sense. This is, after all, I believe like 7 or 8 years after Rebels, roughly. It's hard to tell. But Rosario, she looks like Ahsoka. She even sounds like Ahsoka. It sounds like Rosario's putting on like an Ashley Eckstein kind of voice, which is great. It looks like she's put her research into it. It looks like she's actually looked up who this character is, what this character's all about, what the character looks and sounds and moves like. One little thing, which I'm not too sure of, but the action scenes in which Rosario Dawson's in this one episode, sometimes I think she's a little too aggressive. It looks like she's snarling, looks like she's gritting at her teeth, and I'm like, would a former Jedi do that? I don't know. It's a really minor thing, but I'm not quite sure if that's Ahsoka. But yeah, maybe I'm getting really nitpicky with that. And of course, her appearance in this season felt deserved. It felt like they were building up to it, and it makes sense that she's here. We don't know what happened to her after Rebels. Now we have an idea. She's looking for another character who I'm going to talk about in just a bit. But yeah, not distracting at all. Made perfect sense. She's getting her own spin-off series, which is going to lead into a big limited event series, which is really cool. And yeah, I liked Ahsoka in this show quite a bit, and I'm all for more Rosario Dawson playing her. It's a shame Ashley Eckstein can't play her, but I get why. Dark Troopers. So the Dark Troopers were first introduced in the video games. Again, it's cool to see them. They are set up to be this menacing threat early on when they kidnap the child. And then later on we see that, oh wow, these guys, they are really tough and hard to beat. They're really hardened droids basically. And Mando fights one of them and gets his backside handed to him basically. So they're menacing, they're threatening, but then also they're a bit throwaway and a bit unnecessary. Why couldn't they have just been normal droids? Why couldn't they have just been like, I don't know, the, what they're called? The Death Troopers? It could have been them. Did they have to be Dark Troopers? Did they have to be pulling from this other lore just for this? Especially now that they seem so throwaway compared to a certain other character. I don't know. Cool to see them. Could have done more with them, I think. Maybe we will get more at some point, I don't know. Boba Fett. So another big character that we knew was going to be in this season because we knew about Temuera Morrison being cast. And of course they bizarrely announced that, hey, Temuera Morrison's being cast in this show and he's playing Boba Fett. Why would you announce that? Why would you reveal that? That was going to be a huge moment at the end of the first episode when we see Temuera Morrison walking away. We now know that that was him in season 1. Probably wasn't Temuera Morrison playing him in season 1, but we know that that was Boba Fett at the end of that one episode of season 1. So they make Boba Fett cool again. Great. Always liked Boba Fett. I think he was a character that looked cooler than he was, and this season really gets him in on the action. They introduce some of Temuera Morrison's ancestral and cultural heritage elements in there to flesh out the character a bit more. The fact that he, I believe, is from New Zealand, so they introduce some of the fighting styles and the stances and so on of what the New Zealand people are like, so that's cool. They're also not ignoring the fact that Boba Fett's a clone. They're acknowledging Attack of the Clones and his backstory, and that makes sense as well. They're touching on the fact that, hey, he's a Mandalorian, technically, kind of. So I think they do a good job of fleshing out Boba Fett's backstory a bit more and expanding on him and making him a much more interesting and compelling character than he was even in the original trilogy. We also know that we're getting a spin-off series, The Book of Boba Fett, where it looks like he's going to be running the crime family left behind by Jabba the Hutt. Cool, interesting. I have to imagine at some point we're going to find out how he survived the events of Return of the Jedi. We now know that he's got some sort of scarring on his face because of that. And yeah. One little, again, nitpicky, tiny little thing is that Temuera Morrison's 60 years old. He's not the fittest or the guy that he was back then. So Boba Fett does have a little bit of a belly now. Again, really minor. I'm not too fussed about it, but it is noticeable. And yeah. The child. We now know is called Grogu. I like the name. Yeah, got no problems with the name Grogu. So the child is probably the star of the show now. I mean, The Mandalorian, forget about him. This is all about Baby Yoda. Baby Yoda was a huge cultural thing. Everyone knows about him. Everyone thinks he's cute and funny and hilarious and whatever. This season continues that trend. We now know his backstory. We know he was in the Clone Wars as a student. He was then rescued by someone in the Jedi Temple. Who? Don't know. There are some rumors about that. But at this point, I don't think it's entirely relevant. I don't necessarily think we're going to find out that answer. At least not in the way that we expect. It's probably going to be like a comic book or something that finds that out. But I like the name, I like the backstory. One of the things that is kind of bugging me is that there's a bit of an inconsistency in regards to how intelligent and how capable he is. 1 minute he's literally just a baby. The next minute he's in the ventilation shaft of like the ship and he's trying to connect some wires and he's trying to do some mechanical work. Then the next minute he's having like this deep personal emotional connection with Ahsoka. It's like, right, how intelligent are you? How capable are you? We know you're 50 years old. What does that mean in terms of human years? Why does 1 minute it seems like you're a baby barely capable of walking, and then the next minute you're like a teenager, and then the next minute you're capable of having a really serious conversation? It's odd. But anyway, I do like the character outside of this element. Grand Admiral Thrawn. So this is the character I was hinting at before with Ahsoka. Ahsoka is going to be looking for Thrawn now, and Thrawn is with Ezra, we assume. Ezra from Star Wars Rebels. So the rumour right now is that these spin-off shows, The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, maybe, the Rangers of the New Republic and Ahsoka, they're all going to be interconnecting, they're all going to take place at in the same timeline basically. And they're all going to lead up to this big event series, a bit like how Marvel and Netflix did with their Marvel TV shows, but hopefully a bit better. So Grand Admiral Thrawn, it looks like, is going to be the big bad of this live-action TV side of Star Wars. Great. Grand Admiral Thrawn, always been one of my favourite Star Wars characters. Could they end up adapting the Thrawn trilogy of books in some form? I hope so, because they still are amongst the very best Star Wars stories ever told. And they're in that time period now, so there's no excuses. Yeah, they might not be able to feature like Han, Leia and Luke, but there are ways in which they can adapt certain elements of that. They're all going to have to do some changes as well. Maybe they can have Ezra filling in for Luke or something, I don't know. But the potential here is really good. And who's going to play Thrawn? I have to imagine it's going to be Lars Mikkelsen, who voiced him in Rebels. But maybe he's a little on the old side. I don't know. The fact that we are going to get a live action Thrawn, this is pretty much confirmed now, is really good. I like that. Last thing I want to talk about, Luke Skywalker. So, the final episode, the final moment, Grogu's made a call and we finally find out who picked up on that call. It's Luke Skywalker. He shows up, he kicks some ass, really shows off his Jedi abilities in a way that we always wanted to see. It makes Luke Skywalker cool, it makes him much more of a threat, and it makes him seem like the big, almighty, powerful Jedi that he's led up to be in the sequel trilogy. Brilliant. Really, really good to see him in that action. Then he removes his hood. And this is the bit of the CGI where I was like, oof, that's not good. So, Mark Hamill done the voice of Luke Skywalker here. He was also on set, but he wasn't actually the live action body of Luke Skywalker because Mark Hamill, well, he's a little on the older side now. He can't do the young Luke Skywalker anymore, except for the voice. So, great to see the character, great that they've got him in here, but the CGI was not good. So, here's where what I want to discuss at this point is like, why do they keep doing CGI to de-age the actors? Why not just deep fake it? Deep faking it, I don't know if there's some sort of legal issues here or some tech issues here, but if you deep fake it, it actually looks better. It's cheaper, it's easier. Why don't they do that? I don't know. But a deep fake of Luke Skywalker, there's one on the internet right now where they have deep faked it, and it looks a hell of a lot better than the CGI in this. The CGI in this is passable, it does the job, it gets the point across, but it's not good. And luckily it's not there long, so the fact that it's not good is kind of okay-ish, I guess. But are we going to be seeing more of Luke Skywalker in the future? If we're going to continue Grogu's story, you kind of expect, yeah, maybe. But I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the next time we see Grogu, there's been a big time jump and it's actually just Luke returning Grogu to Mando, or where maybe Grogu just finds Mando after finishing his training or whatever, and we may never see Luke again. But there is potential now to see Luke show up in another form. And Obviously, I'm a big Luke Skywalker fan, I'm a big Mark Hamill fan. Ideally, I would like to have Mark Hamill play Luke Skywalker in some form, even if they do have to do it in this way. Again, deep faking it would be better than the CGI if they can't get the CGI up to scruff. So, yeah. Then there's also the fan casting. A lot of people want Sebastian Stan as Luke Skywalker. Again, I want it to be Mark Hamill. If you can make it Mark Hamill, make it Mark Hamill. But I'd be totally fine if you had to recast him, if you really desperately needed this character to be there. Then yeah, recast him if the CGI of the deepfake and stuff isn't going to be worth it. And this was the one instance in the season where the CGI and the visual effects were actually distracting from the moment. I think it was a really emotional moment that I was like, wow, Luke Skywalker. It's like, and then he removed his hood and it's like, oh no. It was distracting, it took me out of the moment for a bit, and it was hard to get back into it because of how bad the CGI was. But yeah, a lot of this means like, what's going to happen in season 3? Is Mando going to go off to Mandalore and fix the problems there? Are we going to see Luke training Grogu? Is there going to be a time jump of sorts and Grogu's going to be older? I do think we are going to get an older Grogu, by the way, at some point. There's a lot of things up in the air right now. All we know for certain is that we're getting these spin-off shows that are going to lead to Grand Admiral Thrawn, which is cool. But again, how big of a timescale are we talking here? It remains to be seen. Either way, that's my thoughts on The Mandalorian Season 2. I liked it a lot. I think it's great. I think it was a vast improvement over Season 1. If you weren't so keen on Season 1, I do think maybe give Season 2 a go. But it should be noted now that you very much have to have seen the Clone Wars and Rebels to make sense of a lot of the stuff in Season 2, to get the most out of it at the very least. This is very much not its own thing, it's very much a spin-off of the Rebels and of the Clone Wars, which is kind of disappointing but also kind of good in a way as well. It's like, why does everything have to be so connected? But anyway, I liked it a lot, I thought it was great. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below, and until next time, thanks for watching.